Hi folks, this is Tony for aminutetomidnight.com. Please make sure you subscribe to us at our website. So this video I want to cover several different things. First off, I hope you all realise that governments around the world are looking to try and bring us into a digital everything solution, and that includes central bank digital currencies. I just want to play a video short clip from the Bank of International Settlements. This is actually from 2020. It's Augustin Carstens, the General Manager for the Bank of International Settlements. The Bank of International Settlements is basically the central bank of central banks. So just watch this short clip.
Our analysis on CBDC, in particular for the use of general use, we tend to establish the equivalence with cash, and there is a huge difference there. For example, in cash, we don't know, for example, who's using a $100 bill today. We don't know who is using a 1,000 peso bill today. A key difference with the CBDC is that central bank will have absolute control on the rules and regulations that will determine the use of that expression of central bank liability. And also, we will have the technology to enforce that. Those two issues are extremely important, and that makes a huge difference with respect to what cash is.
Notice he's the perfect caricature of the fat banker, much like Klaus Schwab appears to be the perfect caricature of a James Bond villain. A large number of countries around the world are looking into creating central bank digital currencies, and that includes America. And it's all about control, and they want to make these programmable so that they can exclude who they want from spending and tell you what you can and can't spend your money on. So how are they going to get us there? Well, it'll be through a series of manufactured crises. Now look at what's happening in Europe at the moment, for example. Brandon Smith at altmarket.com recently published an article titled "Escalation: Recent Events Suggest Mounting Economic Danger." Economic decline is a process that takes many years, and while you might get an event like the market crash of 1929 or the crash of 2008, these moments of panic are nothing more than the wreckage left behind by the great wave of tumbling ice that everyone should have seen coming far in advance, but they refused. Brandon says, "This is an event that I have been predicting since the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and now it is upon us. I wrote about it extensively in a recent article. Europe is facing energy disaster and it's going to bleed over into the US," he says. Now, Russia has now completely cut off natural gas supplies to Europe, which represent around 40% of all EU energy resources.
Russia essentially weaponizing its energy, saying it will not resume Nord Stream flows until it receives sanctions relief. Yahoo Finance senior columnist Rick Newman here with more on that. Rick, good to see you, my friend. What does this mean for natural gas prices and for a long winter ahead in Europe?
Yeah, it's going to be a tough winter for Europe. It means natural gas prices in Europe are going to soar. They could be 4 times as high as they were last winter, and they were high last winter. I mean, we could see things such as rationing.
Europe's benchmark natural gas prices spiked by 28% a week ago on top of already existing inflation. Oil supplies are also in steep decline for Europe, and the EU has pledged to cut what is left of Russia's oil imports by sea at the end of the year. Sadly, they have offered very little in the way of solutions to the supply side problem. There has been talk of increasing imports of alternative resources from other nations, but the EU is already buying up around 75% of all liquid natural gas from the US. OPEC oil producers have indicated they will not be attempting to increase production anytime soon, probably because they can't due to inflation and operating costs. There is no backup energy resource for Europe. It doesn't exist right now. They'll try to buy up whatever coal, oil and gas they can find on the market while driving up prices even more for other countries. They'll still come up short, which means people are going to freeze this winter. Brandon also goes on to say that the Federal Reserve is a suicide bomber. Inflation is continuing to rise despite the Fed's continued interest rate hikes, giving the central bank even more ammunition to justify higher rates into extreme economic weakness. This will, of course, affect the United States as well as Europe. The Wall Street Journal has an article that says electric bills soar across the country as winter looms. US utility customers faced with some of the largest bills in years are set to pay even more this winter as natural gas prices continue to climb. Natural gas prices have more than doubled this year because of a global supply shortage made worse by the war in Ukraine, and they are expected to remain elevated for months. Let's flip across to the Economic Collapse blog, and Michael Snyder has written, "We just witnessed something that hasn't happened since 2008, and it is causing the housing market to crash." This didn't have to happen, says Michael. The reckless behaviour of the Federal Reserve and our politicians in Washington created a horrifying inflation spiral, and now the Fed is feverishly raising interest rates in a desperate attempt to get inflation back under control. I don't actually believe they do want inflation under control, but anyway. But everyone knows that rapidly raising rates is going to absolutely crush the housing market, and I think that's probably part of the goal. When the Federal Reserve hikes interest rates, that puts upward pressure on mortgage rates. And as mortgage rates go higher, more and more potential home buyers will be forced onto the sidelines. With fewer potential home buyers in the market, that will put downward pressure on home prices. This is basic stuff that you would learn in an Econ 101 class, but the Fed officials can't seem to understand that what they are doing is going to be extremely destructive to the US economy as a whole. Well, as much as I like Michael Snyder's writings, I think he is missing the point. If this is a deliberately engineered collapse, as Brandon Smith says, the Federal Reserve is a suicide bomber, which I believe basically they are. But back to Michael's otherwise very good article. Do you remember the pain that we went through in 2008? That entire crisis was precipitated by a collapse of the housing market, and now a similar scenario is starting to unfold right in front of our eyes. In fact, something just happened that we haven't seen in all the years since 2008. The average interest rate on a 30-year fixed-rate mortgage rose above 6% for the first time since the financial crisis, according to federal data released Thursday. But when mortgage rates get really high, the wealthy can still afford to buy homes because many of them don't even need mortgages. But for the rest of us, much higher mortgage rates make a world of difference. And demand for mortgages is drying up really fast. And briefly, just one more Michael Snyder article. Why are Walmart and other major US retailers cancelling billions of dollars in orders as summer comes to an end? Do they know something they aren't telling us? Walmart, Target and other major US retailers are literally cancelling billions of dollars in orders ahead of the coming holiday season. I've never heard of such a thing happening before, and under normal circumstances it wouldn't make any sense at all. The holiday season is typically the busiest time of year for retailers, and at this time in 2021 there was actually a great deal of concern that there wouldn't be enough inventory due to global supply chain problems. But now everything has changed. All of a sudden major retailers are feverishly cancelling orders, and this would only make sense if a severe economic downturn was imminent. For example, Walmart is admitting that it has cancelled billions of dollars in orders as we approach the upcoming holiday season. And Walmart isn't the only one. The other major chains are also, according to Michael's article. And of course, aside from all this, you've got the threat of potential expansion of the war in the Ukraine and World War III, and I won't even go there. But you should get the general picture that things are not looking good and that economic collapse or a managed economic implosion that allows them to bring about bail-ins and then ultimately a central bank digital currency regime around the globe is looking very much on the cards. So difficult times are ahead. So what do you do? This is where I want to come to end here, just with a few ideas. Several years ago, I wrote an article on the A Minute to Midnight website titled Preparing for Economic Collapse, and I just want to quickly go over that again. Preparing for what may happen during an economic collapse. Number one, food shortages can happen. You cannot be sure that supermarkets or corner stores will remain open or have their shelves stocked. How much food do you have stored? How long will it last? Do you have a garden or any food growing? Think about vegetables, herbs and fruit. Number two, medicines may become scarce during an economic collapse. Do you have a basic medical kit on hand? Does it have the things that you need to survive? Number three, when an economy collapses, so might the power grid. If the power grid goes down for a long period or is down intermittently, how will you cook, light your home or stay warm? What plans do you have in place to cover this? Number four, during an economic collapse, you cannot even take water for granted. Do you have a store of water? And if so, how much? And if water becomes scarce, like if the power grid is down, do you have a means of purifying water? Number five, during an economic collapse or crisis, your credit cards and debit cards may stop working. What happens if you cannot get money from ATM machines, bank accounts are frozen? Do you have plans in place to cover this, like cash on hand, gold or silver, etc.? Number six, crime, rioting and looting become commonplace during an economic collapse. If this occurs, how will you protect yourself, your family and your assets? Number seven, during a financial collapse, many people will start bartering. Do you have anything that you could use as bartering items? Think about what people may want or need during a time of crisis and figure out what you could keep stashed away as potential bartering items. Number eight, your currency may rapidly lose value during an economic crisis. If this happens, then gold and silver will be the true money that is left standing. But you should also have at least some, cash on hand and so on too. And by the way, gold and silver may collapse during the initial phases as well, even if it does, and that'll be mainly the paper market, even if the physical stuff stays up or goes up, which I believe it will. Okay, number nine, you cannot be sure of continuous employment or ongoing business. If you lose your job or your business becomes slow, do you have any alternative ways of making money or doing business? And lastly, number 10, the government will not save you. Okay, so apart from the prepping, that's just to get people thinking about it, also spiritually, make sure that you have your spiritual house in order. We really need to be focusing on that now, preparing for the difficult times spiritually as well as physically, and obviously salvation through Jesus Christ, faith in Jesus Christ, and that alone is the only true answer spiritually to preparing. And then after that, once you have salvation, then seek God for what else you should do. So that's pretty much all I wanted to cover in this video. But it's just more of a heads up to tell you that, to be prepared because things are looking like they're going down the gurgler rapidly. Okay, A Minute to Midnight's run 100% by donations too, and I know it is really tough for people at the moment, and that's the same here. So if you're able to donate, it's always much appreciated. Any donations are always greatly appreciated, and you can do that at aminutetomidnight.com. And also make sure you subscribe to us at aminutetomidnight.com, because I can't put all of our videos on YouTube, for example. Some of them get censored, so they'll always be at our website, if not anywhere else. And the music used I've written, played and recorded. So that's it, folks. God bless and stay safe, and hopefully we'll be back with another video in a few days.